Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of my podcast. This episode is about very interesting topic. Is learning English boring? We can start right now. Uh, answer of this question is really simple. Learning English isn't boring. Learning English can be boring when you do boring things. If When you learn English with boring English grammar books, or you can do grammar exercises. Yes, of course, learning English is boring. But when you do interesting things, learning English can be your hobby. Now I want to tell you why is learning English very interesting. I like watching movies and series in English without any subtitles. I recommend you to listen to movies and series in English with English subtitles or without it, and you can listen and you can watch it movies and series in English that are interesting for you, that you like. And I like watching movies and series in English without any subtitles. The second thing I want to tell you about the biggest word of English podcasts. There are a lot of English podcasts, and what is a podcast? Podcast is an audio show that about a lot of topics, and you can listen to English podcast to about every topic. English podcasts are very interesting, educational and free. I like English podcast for listeners. And the most famous and my favorite English podcasts are Luke's English podcast, Speak English Podcast Now with Georgiana, and All is English. Now I want to tell you more about it. Luke's English Podcast is an is the best English podcast for learners of English. Luke Thompson is an English teacher and stand-up comedian. His podcast is very interesting, funny, educational, and you can listen to real British English with humor and fun, because his podcast is about British English and British culture. Luke has created 916 episodes of his podcast. Every episode of his podcast has at least 1 hour. His podcast is free. I really recommend you to listen to it. The next is Speak English Podcast Now with Georgiana. Georgiana is an English teacher from the United States. She is very beautiful and attractive, and her podcast is about American English and culture. And the next is All is English podcast. Is an American podcast about American English. In this podcast, there are free English teachers that are chatting in American English about learning English, and you can listen to your English podcast for free about the topic that is interesting for you, and and what next? You can create something what is interesting. I can recommend you to create your own story in English. But the best thing for you is to create your own your own English podcast. The best you can find thanks to ChatGPT. Everything what you needed, and yes, of course, you don't I don't know to forget that you can hire your own English teacher. There are a lot of websites, but I can recommend you Slovak website. There are a lot of English teachers from Slovakia, or you can use people. I have to pause my podcast because my dad was here and I totally forgotten what I was talking about. But yes, of course, I was talking about learning English, and you can hire your own English teacher. The fact that you can find it on the website. I have my own English teacher, and it's very funny, and I like learning English with my English teacher, because my English teacher is the best English teacher in the world. Every lesson, my English lessons with my English teacher are very interesting, educational, full of humor and fun, and I like English lessons with my English teacher a lot. And you can hire your own English teacher, and you do your English your learning English more interesting, and you can chat with ChatGPT about everything, because ChatGPT is a very good helper. And in the end of this episode, I want to tell you that the best way how to practice your speaking skills in English is to record yourself and create your own podcast about a topic that is interesting for you, as I done it. And I want to tell you bye bye.